Hello you lovely lot and welcome to a brand new video. My name is Katie and as you can tell I am going to be having a little old review of the Peebles Studio Gouache paints. This is part of a series I have on at the moment where I'm just trying out different gouaches of different budgets and brands. And if you've enjoyed this video, I definitely recommend checking out the playlist and watching some of the other paintings I've done with this fabulous medium. I also have to point out every now and then that yes, I pronounce gouache as gouache. I am definitely aware it's sometimes pronounced as gouache, gouache. To be honest, you know what I'm talking about, and I guess as long as we're communicating about the same paint here, it doesn't really matter that much. But now I've got that out of the way with, let's talk a little bit more about this specific paint right now. So I purchased these back, I want to say November, December time last year, whilst I was in the London Graphic Centre, which is a shop in London, but it's also got an online shop too. I can't remember the exact price because I'd partially ripped the label off, but I think they were about £6.95, somewhere in that region. I thought for that price, it's worth giving them a try, right? And today I am finally getting to crack them open. So, the 12 colours that we have are primary yellow, vermilion, carmine, primary magenta, cobalt violet, primary cyan, spring green, emerald green, yellow ochre, burnt umber, ivory black and pearl white. And upon swatching them, yes, I was pretty pleased with the initial first impression there. The redder tones and the yellowy tones worked really well. I have noticed, and this seems to be throughout most of the gouaches I've tried, even the expensive ones, anything with any blue tones in there, it doesn't quite seem to be as opaque, but hey, I'm aware of that, we can work around it. The white was incredibly white, the black was incredibly black, and everything in between was just at a nice opacity. I was actually really impressed by how vibrant the yellow, vermilion, carmine and magenta were. They definitely stood out more than the other colours provided. But of course, swatching them is one thing, it's not quite the same as an actual painting experience now, is it? The paper I'm using is the A4 watercolour paper by Frisk. It's 300 GSM and that's what I've been using on all of the other dragons. And for me personally, using a nice hot press watercolour paper, especially for gouache, it just works out best for me. I really like to have a nice flat application of paint, and sometimes I tend to find anything with a bit too much texture can just distract away from that lovely matte finish that you get with these paints. Now, one of the things I noticed about this set, and it did surprise me a little bit, but it is not the end of the world, was the lack of a ultramarine blue. However, I did manage to kind of create my own by adding a little bit of the cobalt violet and the primary cyan together. And that, in my opinion, created something pretty close to ultramarine, so I was happy to carry on. I went in the centre of the picture with just that pure black colour because I was actually really impressed by how deep that was. I'll admit I did have to go over the blue a couple of times, but again, I think that's just down to the blue pigments that you tend to find in this paint. But after that second coat, I definitely had a little bit more of a consistent texture, and all was good to carry on. For the black, I only needed one coat there. For the wing membranes of this dragon, I thought I would keep them relatively dark and flat, because this is a black hole dragon. Now, of course, I didn't want to paint the whole thing black as that just wouldn't make a very interesting picture, so I decided to add for the wing closest to us a bit of that magenta and some black, and the wing in the background, the emerald green, again mixed with a bit of that black, and I really liked how that worked out. I liked just having two different coloured wings, why not? So whilst past me is painting away in the background, I'll give you some thoughts so far on these paints. And yes, I'll compare them to another budget paint which I tried, I think might have been on my last video, and that was the Hobbycraft ones. The Hobbycraft cost me £8, and I'll be really honest with you, the quality of paint was really poor. It wasn't very opaque. The white, oh my goodness, I have never seen such a dark white paint before, and it was barely opaque. It's safe to say these cost me less than £8. They didn't cost me the full retail price, which I think was 10, but still, even if you paid £10, these are far better than the Hobbycraft ones. To be honest, I kind of think children's poster paints would be better than the Hobbycraft ones, so I guess that's not an entirely fair comparison. For me, as an artist, I have been incredibly broke, especially after my university days, where I couldn't afford to buy luxury art supplies. Their price point seemed completely out of my grasp, and cheaper alternatives, which, again, referring back to the Hobbycraft ones I might have gone for, probably would have made me lose confidence in this particular medium. However, I can say my experience using these paints, and I really did put them to the test here, has been a really positive one. I like the fact they were opaque enough to layer over without any interference of the lower layers. I'd actually made a little bit of a mistake with the black hole part, and I'd filled in an area which was not meant to be that colour, and that ultramarine colour that I'd mixed up covered it no problem. In fact, I didn't even need to give it a second coat. The star details and swirliness I'm adding to that black hole warpiness pattern behind, again, that's just one layer, and that's just been with the primary magenta and a little bit of that pearl white. And it worked great, and yeah, I was really happy with these. Now, don't get me wrong, I do like to try the more luxurious ones. I am in a position much better than post-university 20 years ago nearly. And I am lucky enough to be able to try that. However, part of me still wants to try these more cost-friendly supplies, just, I guess, to advise you guys that you don't have to spend a lot, especially if it's just not within your budget, or you're wanting to try these kinds of mediums for the first time, but you don't really want to invest a lot of money in there. I tried some Royal and Langnickel gouache paint. It was only a 6-pack, and I think you can get them for about £3 on Amazon, and they were brilliant. And that just goes to show you don't need to spend a lot. I would put these in a category, again, where they are really good for their money. You have a great selection of colours. The opacity is as much as you'd expect for gouache to be, apart from some of the blue-toned ones. But again, I think there's just issues with pigments and gouache. The consistency was really nice. In fact, I would go as far to say as you don't really need to add much water to get it to that sweet spot. When everything was dry areas, especially large areas, there were no, I guess, uneven or inconsistencies with the finish. They dried beautifully matte. And with some of the expensive ones I have found, and that might just be down to the binder separating ever so slightly and me not mixing things properly, but I have found with various gouaches that you do sometimes have a slight reflection in certain areas, and that can perhaps just add a bit of a dampener on your picture there. There's no information on light fast rating, but how I like to practice my art anyway, if I was going to use these, I would use these for creating prints with. Gouache traditionally is for artworks that are going to be photographed or photocopied and turned into, I guess, more of a mass medium, so anything too shiny is not going to work too well anyway, and it doesn't need to be light fast. These are really good also for sketchbooks too. I mean, let's face it, if it's going in a sketchbook, it's not going to be underneath the blistering sun all day now, is it? But alas, that is my thoughts for now. I'll go into a little bit more as to what's going on with the picture. So yes, obviously it is a black hole dragon, but if I kept it completely black you wouldn't see it at all. And I did want the tones quite dark on there, but I also did want to add just a little smidgen of colour in there too. I used a selection of the primary magenta, the cobalt violet, the cyan, and I even used a little smidgen of that emerald green mixed in with a bit of white to create the scales. And because the surface I was painting on was so dark, these colours stood out so nicely, it kind of gave a bit of a holographic effect. Obviously not the kind where you actually shine light on it and you get that hollow, but like if you were going to replicate that with paint, that's how I would do it. I guess I chose that particular visual appearance to this dragon as if to demonstrate that this black hole dragon is sucking in all of the light and all of the colour. And yeah, I liked how it worked. It's kind of hard to draw a black hole dragon or a dragon based on a black hole. But I guess if there was going to be such a thing, then this would be my interpretation of it. I used my Royal and Langnickel trusted rigger brush at the moment because I really wanted them scales to be teeny tiny this time. I know some of the other dragons I've done, the scales have been slightly larger, but I wanted this to be tiny, and I think that did the job. I do feel like I have to add though, do not mix your colours together like I did with a rigger brush. It's not going to do your brush any good, and it's not going to do a very good job of mixing either. I don't know why I did it, but yeah, don't do that. Not if you like your brushes. Now, while this video draws to an end, I want to say a massive thank you to Zoe's Wild Art. I was having a bit of a quandary as to which paints to use next, but she very kindly suggested I try these because she's tried them herself and she definitely recommends them, and I can see why she likes them so much, so thank you for that. And I'll leave some links down below to her socials. It'll either be in the description or in the comments. I think for the next painting I'm going to use the Schminker ones. It's only a restricted set of colours there, so that'll be interesting to see how they fare up. As the Royal and Langnickel ones did, it goes to show that you don't need a huge amount of colours. It is very handy, don't get me wrong, but you don't need a huge array of colours. As long as they mix together well, you can pretty much work however you like. Anyway, you lovely lot, here is the finished result of the Black Hole Dragon using the Peebles Studio Gouache. Oh dear, it does look quite dark on here, but I do promise you, as you saw as it was sliding over it, there are some good colours coming through. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll leave the gouache playlist on screen and a video as well that I think you'll enjoy. In the meantime, thank you for watching. I'll see you lovely lots soon. Bye!